Okay, now we're going to add a drop-down list for selecting platforms. In this video, we just want to focus on rendering this list. We'll implement filtering after, okay? So let's add a new component called platform selector. Now, in this component, we're going to return a menu. Menu is one of the components in Chakra that we can use to render a beautiful drop-down list. Now, this is a composite component, so it has different children. So here, first we should add a menu button. Now, we want to render this as a regular button. Here we can give it a label like platforms. So when the user clicks on this button, the menu opens and then we'll see the items. Now, it's also nice to give this a right icon. Here we're going to use bootstrap chevron down. Okay, so here we have a button. Right after we add a menu list. And just as a reminder, you don't need to memorize any of this stuff. You can always go back to Chakra's documentation and read about the menu component. Now here inside the menu list, we add one or more menu items. So for this demo, let's add a few items, 2 and 3. Now let's remove React on the top. Now let's test our application up to this point. So we go to our app component and add our platform selector right above our game grid. So platform selector. Good. Here's what we get. Beautiful. Now we should render these items dynamically. To do that, we're going to use a different endpoint on ROG API. So let's look at the documentation of ROG API. Here we have an endpoint called platforms. Now here we have two options. We can get a list of video game platforms or a list of parent platforms. In this case, we're going to get the list of parent platforms, which is shorter and easier to use. So let's see where this endpoint is. So here's the address, /platforms/lists/parents. Now we need to create a hook to fetch data from this endpoint. So back to the project. Here in the hooks folder, let's add a new hook called use platforms. Now here first we need to define an interface called platform. Our platform objects have 3 properties: ID, which is a number, name, which is a string, and slug, which is a string. Now here we define a custom hook called use platforms. And here we call use data. As the endpoint, we pass /platforms/lists/parents. We should also add our interface here, platform, good. So our hook is ready. Now we should export it from this module. So look, with this generic hook that we created earlier, now we can easily create custom hooks for fetching all kinds of data. We can do this with very little code. So now let's go back to our platform selector component and use our new hook. So use platforms. We get the data. And then use it to render the menu items dynamically. So we map each platform to a menu item. Now here we should set the key to platform.id and the label to platform.name. Let's see if it's working. So back in the browser. All right, we've got the platforms, beautiful. Now, what if an error happens? Well, let's grab the error from our hook. Now, if there is an error, again, I would prefer not to render this component as opposed to throw an error in the face of the user. So if we have an error, we're going to return null. Now to test this, let's go to our custom hook and put an X here. Now we don't get the platforms list. Beautiful. So let's revert this back. We're done with this step. So let's commit our code to the repository. Here I'm going to say build platform selector. Next, we'll implement filtering.